My parents co-signed a big loan for my Betrayal brother's failed business, forcing me to repay it or they'd lose their own house. They said it was my responsibility. So I paid it, but they didn't realize the clause 1 added to the final contract. What if the very family you sacrificed everything for, the one you always tried to save, pushed you so far that you had no choice but to take everything from them? Because that's exactly what I did. The cold, sterile glow of my computer screen usually meant a late night, deep in debugging code for a multi-million-dollar project. But that day, the real chill wasn't from the AC. It was the tremor in my mom's voice on the phone, a voice I hadn't heard in months, only ringing when their golden child made a mess too big for them to handle. I'm Eleanor, I thought, and for 31 years, I've been the responsible one, the reliable one, the boring one. The one who wasn't David. Honey, we need to talk, my mom said, her voice barely a whisper. It's about the house. My gut clenched. I knew. I absolutely knew what this was about. David's latest revolutionary startup had imploded, and with it, their home equity loan. I'd warned them 6 months prior, when they'd mortgaged their home to fund his brilliant idea for, wait for it, an AI-powered toaster that could predict your breakfast preferences. How bad is it? I asked, though a sickening figure was already burning in my mind. 100,000. My dad's voice boomed from the speakerphone. The bank, they're starting foreclosure proceedings. I leaned back in my office chair, gazing out at the vast Seattle skyline, feeling a strange mix of dread and bitter validation. And David, he's trying his best, sweetie, my mom interjected, already rushing to his defense. These things happen in business. You know how innovative minds work. No, Mom. I cut her off, my voice sharper than I intended. How is David planning to fix this? Silence. Just the heavy, deafening silence I'd come to expect. I closed my laptop, grabbed my keys, and walked out. I'll be there in 30 minutes. The drive felt like a cruel trip down memory lane. Past the elementary school where David's mediocre art always made the bulletin board, while my perfect math scores went unmentioned. Past the high school where they cheered at every one of his football games, but somehow missed my valedictorian speech because he had a big game that day. They were waiting on the porch when I pulled up, a picture of suburban despair. Mom wrung her hands. Dad looked utterly defeated. And there, sprawled on the porch swing like he didn't have a single care in the world, was my brother, David. Sis, he bounded up, that infuriating, trademark grin plastered across his face. You're not going to believe it, but I've got another idea that'll make this all worth it. Stop talking, I snapped, brushing past him and into the house. I set my bag on the kitchen counter. Show me the paperwork. Mom scrambled, a flurry of panicked movements, to get the foreclosure notice while Dad busied himself making coffee no one would drink. David followed, his girlfriend Chloe trailing behind, her phone practically fused to her hand. It's really not as bad as they're making it sound, David insisted, oblivious. The algorithm was solid. We just needed more time. The algorithm told people when they wanted toast. I deadpanned, cutting him off. It wasn't exactly curing cancer. You never understood the vision, Chloe piped up, finally glancing away from her screen. David's ideas are ahead of their time. I bit back the scathing retort bubbling up, watching Mom spread the papers across the counter like a death warrant. The numbers were exactly what I'd expected. Worse, actually, with the late fees. I could cover it, yes, but it would mean liquidating most of my carefully built investments. We wouldn't ask if we had any other option, Dad said quietly, his voice heavy with a new, unfamiliar humility. We know how hard you've worked for your money. For the first time in 31 years, they noticed my success. Funny how that worked. Remember when I wanted to go to MIT? I asked, scanning the documents. You said we couldn't afford it, that I should be practical and go to state school. Eleanor, that was different, Mom started, her voice wavering. Was it? I challenged, meeting her gaze. Because you remortgaged your house for David's toast robot, but you couldn't help me with tuition? I paid my own way. Every semester, every book, every meal. You were always so capable, Mom said, almost as a compliment. You didn't need our help. No. I agreed. a cold certainty hardening my voice. I didn't. And I don't think you need it now either. I stood up, gathering my things. Their faces fell in unison. Wait, Dad called out, just as I reached the door. Please, we'll lose everything. I turned back, seeing them all. Mom, close to tears. Dad, looking small and broken. David, with that familiar glint of entitlement still in his eyes. And Chloe, recording everything for who knows what insufferable reason. I'll help, I said finally. The word's a promise, but a dangerous one. But we're doing this my way. I paused, letting the weight of my declaration settle. I'll have my lawyer draw up the paperwork tomorrow. The relief on their faces was instantaneous, almost sickening. They didn't even ask about the terms. They never did with David's ventures. Why start now? As I drove home, I pulled out my phone and dialed my friend, Isabella. Remember that conversation we had about karma and contract law? I asked, a predatory smile forming on my lips. I need a favor. The family finally called, she asked, her voice laced with knowing amusement. They did, I confirmed, merging onto the highway. And they're about to learn that responsibility comes with a price tag. A very specific price tag. Isabella's office always smelled of rich leather and calming lavender. She'd made partner last year, and her corner office, all gleaming mahogany and floor-to-ceiling windows, perfectly reflected her success. As I settled into a visitor's chair, she uncapped her pen. So, you're finally doing it, she stated, not asked. The house play we talked about. They handed it to me on a silver platter. I said, pulling out the foreclosure notice. They need $100,000 to save their house. I have it, but I want more than just their gratitude this time. You want the house, Isabella said, a glint in her eye. I want control, I corrected, my voice firm. They've spent 30 years making decisions that benefit David at everyone else's expense. Time to change the game. Isabella started writing. We'll need to structure this carefully. Make it ironclad, but not obviously predatory. Something they'll sign without thinking twice. They never think twice when it comes to David, I scoffed. Why start now? For the next hour, we crafted the agreement. It was beautiful in its simplicity. I'd pay off the loan, but a modified lien would add me to the title. One signature, and I'd own 1/3 of their home. Another clause, buried deep in the middle, would trigger full transfer of ownership once the debt was cleared. They won't read this carefully, Isabella warned, pausing her pen. Are you sure you want to go through with it? My phone buzzed. A text from David. Thanks for helping the parents out, sis. By the way, got another idea to run by you later. This one's guaranteed money. I showed Isabella the message. She just nodded, a slight smirk playing on her lips, and kept writing. The next morning, I met my parents at their bank. Mom was in her Sunday best. Dad had actually ironed his shirt. They both radiated a palpable relief, a desperate hope. Where's David? I asked, noting his absence. Oh, he had an important meeting with some investors, Mom chirped quickly, already spinning a new narrative. For his new project. Of course he did. I set my briefcase on the loan officer's desk. Shall we begin? The loan officer, a tired-looking woman named Susan, spread out the documents. I've reviewed the modified agreement your lawyer sent over. Everything appears to be in order. I watched my parents' faces as Susan explained the terms. They nodded along, barely listening, their eyes fixed on the number at the bottom of the page. The number that would save their home. So, Eleanor will be added to the title? Dad asked, but his tone suggested he didn't truly care about the answer. Yes, as a co-owner, Susan confirmed. And there are some additional terms regarding future ownership transfer based on the loan satisfaction. Mom was already reaching for the pen, a hasty movement. That's fine. That's all fine. Your family, after all. I almost laughed. Family, right? Just sign here, here, and initial here, Susan instructed, pointing to the marked spots. Their signatures were quick, eager. They didn't even skim the pages. Just like they never questioned David's business plans, or bothered to read those investment prospectuses. I signed last, my hand steady. With each stroke of the pen, I felt lighter, a decade of resentment finally lifting. Congratulations, Susan said, stamping the final page. The transfer will process today. The foreclosure proceedings will be halted immediately. Mom hugged me, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, honey. We'll pay you back somehow. I promise. No need, I said, tucking my copy of the documents into my briefcase. Consider it an investment in my future. Dad squeezed my shoulder. We're lucky to have such a responsible daughter. As we walked out, Mom was already on the phone with David, gushing about the good news. I could hear his voice through the speaker, loud and celebratory. Probably already planning his next venture. Dinner tonight? Mom suggested, hanging up. To celebrate. David and Chloe can join us. Sorry, I have plans, I said, checking my watch, a familiar, well-worn excuse. Work dinner. You know how it is. They didn't, actually. They'd never really asked about my work, my success, my life. Back in my car, I took a moment, just breathing. Then I called Isabella. It's done. How do you feel? She asked. I looked back at the bank, at my parents still standing there, probably planning how to tell their friends they'd avoided foreclosure. They'd spin it into another story about resilience, about family coming together. They had no idea what was coming. I feel like I just bought the most expensive revenge in history, I said, a slow, chilling smile spreading across my face. And it was worth every penny. I started the engine, muttering to myself, You wanted me to save the house? It's mine now. 6 months blurred past in a frenzy of overtime and side projects. Every extra dollar went toward paying down that loan, while my parents acted like everything was back to normal. Tonight was another family dinner I couldn't avoid, Mom's birthday. I arrived late, straight from a demanding consulting gig. The driveway was already full, notably with David's new Tesla, because apparently bankruptcy was no reason to drive a modest car. There's my responsible girl. Mom called out as I entered, a new dress adorning her. Probably another gift from David. He always bought expensive presents with other people's money. The dining room was a perfect snapshot of everything that was wrong with our family. Mom and Dad beaming at David while he gestured dramatically, describing his latest venture. Chloe, of course, recording everything for her social media, adding filters to make our modest dining room look aesthetic. And me, still in my work clothes, clutching a practical gift card I'd actually paid for myself. Eleanor, you won't believe what your brother's working on now. Dad practically glowed. Tell her, son. David leaned back, running a hand through his expertly styled hair. It's a revolutionary dating app that uses zodiac signs and cryptocurrency. That sounds fascinating. I cut in, setting down my bag. Mom, happy birthday. Oh, thank you, sweetie, she said, taking the envelope without opening it. But let David finish. This could be the next big thing. I caught Chloe smirking behind her phone. She'd only been dating David for 3 months, but she'd already mastered the family dynamic. As I was saying, David continued, we're calling it Starcoin. Users match based on astrological compatibility, and they can only communicate by sending each other custom cryptocurrency tokens. How are you funding this one? I asked, serving myself some pasta. The table went quiet. Too quiet. Actually, Mom said, brightening a little too quickly, we were hoping to discuss that. You've been so generous with helping us out. No. The word came out sharp, cutting, making Dad flinch. But you haven't even heard the projections. David protested, leaning forward. Chloe's already got influencers lined up to promote it. We're talking millions in potential revenue. Like the toast robot? I stabbed at my pasta, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Or the smart socks. Or the cryptocurrency for pets. Those were learning experiences, Mom defended him. Every entrepreneur has failures before their big break. And who paid for those learning experiences? I set down my fork, the scraping sound echoing in the sudden silence. While David was learning, I was working 60-hour weeks, canceling vacations, turning down promotions that required travel, all to pay off his mess. Don't be jealous just because your brother dreams bigger than a cubicle, Chloe chimed in, finally lowering her phone, her voice laced with venom. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. A cubicle. I laughed. A short, bitter sound. I'm a senior software architect. I lead teams that build actual functioning technology, not astrology-based Ponzi schemes. Eleanor. Mom scolded, her voice sharp. It's my birthday. Can't we just have a nice dinner? Sure, Mom. Let's have a nice dinner. Let's talk about how you're planning to fund David's next failure. Dad cleared his throat nervously. Well, we thought maybe with the house situation stable now. The house situation isn't stable. I corrected him, my voice dangerously calm. I'm still paying off the loan. The loan I took out to save your house because of his last brilliant idea. And we're so grateful, Mom said quickly. You know, you'll probably make that money back in no time. You're so good with finances, unlike your brother. He's more of a big-picture person. The table erupted in agreeing chuckles. Even Chloe laughed, probably not realizing she was dating a big-picture person who couldn't pay his own rent. I stood up, my chair scraping harshly against the floor. I need to go. I have an early meeting tomorrow. But we haven't had cake. Mom protested. And David was going to show us his presentation. I'm sure it's fascinating, I said, grabbing my bag. Send me the pitch deck. I'll add it to my collection. As I reached the door, David called out, Hey, sis, think about the investment opportunity. Family discount. I turned back one last time. They were all there, bathed in the dining room light, looking like a perfect family photo. Mom in her new dress, Dad with his proud smile, David holding court, Chloe documenting it all. You know what the funny thing is? I said, my voice cutting through the performative cheer. None of you have ever asked me what I do with my cubicle job. Not once. You've never asked about my projects, my promotions, my actual success. Because it's not exciting enough. It's not big picture enough. Honey, Mom started, her voice a plea. I'll send this month's loan payment on Friday, I said, closing the door behind me, the finality echoing in the quiet night. In my car, I pulled up my banking app. Another $5,000 transfer to the loan account. Another step closer to owning their house outright. They thought I was paying off their debt. They had no idea I was buying their future. The email from my bank arrived on a Tuesday morning. Loan payment confirmation. Final balance, $0. I forwarded it to Isabella with just 2 words. It's time. Her response came minutes later. Paperwork filed. Ownership transfer will process by end of day. I should have felt something more. Relief, maybe. Or guilt. Instead, I felt nothing but a calm certainty as I drove to my parents' house, my house now, technically, for what I knew would be an interesting conversation. I found them in the kitchen with David and Chloe, huddled around a laptop, probably reviewing another doomed business plan. Mom saw me first. Eleanor, we were just about to call you. David's got the pitch deck ready for Starcoin. Actually, I interrupted, setting my briefcase on the counter with a thud. We need to talk about the house. Oh, did you make another payment? Dad asked, a slight impatience in his voice. You're so diligent with those. I made the final payment. I kept my voice neutral, almost flat. The loan is paid off. Mom clapped her hands together. That's wonderful. Now we can focus on David's new venture. We were thinking of taking out a small business loan. You can't, I said. David finally looked up from his laptop, a frown creasing his brow. What do you mean, they can't? They can't take out a loan against the house, I explained, pulling out the documents. Because they don't own it anymore. I do. The kitchen went silent. A shocking, palpable silence. Even Chloe stopped typing on her phone, her thumb hovering. What are you talking about? Mom laughed nervously, a high-pitched, brittle sound. Of course, we own the house. I laid out the paperwork on the counter. Remember that agreement you signed at the bank? The one you didn't read? It included a transfer of ownership clause that activated when the loan was paid in full. Dad grabbed the papers, his hands shaking so violently the pages rustled. This can't be legal. It's completely legal, I said, my voice unwavering. You signed it. All of you did. Check the signatures. David stood up, so fast his chair crashed backward. You tricked them. This is fraud. No, it's contract law, I retorted, meeting his furious gaze without flinching. Something you might want to study before your next startup failure. Eleanor. Mom's voice was a tremulous plea. We're your family. You can't do this to us. Family? I laughed, a raw, bitter sound. Was it family when you remortgaged your retirement to fund David's pet cryptocurrency? Was it family when you missed my college graduation for his football game? Was it family when you spent my college fund on his first failed business? That's different. Mom protested, her face contorted in disbelief. He needed consequences. I cut in, my voice cold steel. And so did you. Chloe was filming everything now, her phone held steady, probably already planning the viral sympathy post. This is so toxic, she muttered, like literally evil. The house is mine, I continued, ignoring her, my voice clear and authoritative. Legally and completely. You can stay as tenants if you want. I'll draw up the lease, market rate rent. You can't be serious, Dad said, still staring at the papers, his voice hollow. We're your parents. And I'm your daughter, I countered. The one you never needed to worry about. The responsible one. The boring one. I picked at my briefcase, the click of the latch sounding loud in the stunned silence. Turns out I learned something from David after all. How to execute a hostile takeover. David lunged forward, but Dad caught his arm, holding him back. You ruined everything, David shouted, his voice cracking with rage. All my investors were counting on this house as collateral. More investors you lied to? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Add them to the list. I'm sure Chloe can make a great TikTok about it. Mom was crying now, tears streaming down her face. Please, sweetie, we can work something out. We're still family. Family doesn't exploit family, I said, my voice firm. But you never learned that lesson, did you? You just kept enabling him. Kept sacrificing everything for his dreams. Well, now you've sacrificed your house too. I'll fight this. David threatened. I'll get lawyers. Please do. I smiled, a genuine, chilling smile. I'm sure they'd love to review your financial history. All those investors you defrauded might be interested, too. I headed for the door, then turned back one last time. Oh, and David? Your Zodiac cryptocurrency idea? It already exists. It failed last year, but you'd know that if you did any actual research. The last thing I saw as I left was Dad sinking into a chair, the papers crumpling in his hands, while Mom tried to comfort a raging David. Chloe was already typing furiously on her phone, probably crafting the perfect victimhood narrative for her followers. In my car, I called Isabella. How did it go? She asked, a hint of amusement in her tone. About as expected, I replied. Tears, threats, guilt trips. The usual. And how do you feel? I looked back at the house, my house now, and watched David storm out to his Tesla, Chloe trailing behind him, still recording. I feel like I just closed the most expensive therapy session in history, I said, a profound sense of closure washing over me. And it was worth every penny. The fallout was nuclear. Within hours, Chloe had posted a heavily edited version of our confrontation, painting me as the evil sister who stole her poor family's home. The comments were exactly what you'd expect. So toxic. Family is forever. How could she do this to her own parents? I was at work when Mom's first wave of flying monkeys hit. My phone buzzed with messages from aunts, cousins, and family friends I hadn't heard from in years. Your mother is heartbroken, read Aunt Carol's text. How could you be so cruel? I muted my phone and focused on my code review until Michael, my team lead, tapped on my desk. Your brother's in the lobby, he said quietly. Security called up. He's making quite a scene. I pulled up the lobby security feed on my monitor. Sure enough, there was David, red-faced and gesturing wildly, while Chloe filmed everything. Security was keeping him from the elevators. Want me to call the police? Michael asked, concerned. No need, I said, standing up, straightening my blazer. I'll handle it. The elevator ride down was surprisingly peaceful. I used those 30 seconds to center myself, to remember every missed opportunity, every dismissed achievement, every time they chose him over me. The lobby was silent when I stepped out, except for David's voice echoing off the marble walls. Where is she? I know she's here. You can't hide behind security, Eleanor. I walked straight toward him. I'm not hiding, David. I'm working. You know, that thing some of us do. He spun around, Chloe's camera following his every movement. You think you're so smart, don't you? Tricking our parents, stealing their house. I paid for that house, I said calmly, my voice steady. Every penny of it. While you were launching failed startups, I was working overtime to clean up your mess. They were going to help fund Starcoin. We had investors lined up. No, you had more people to scam lined up. I corrected him, a weary sigh escaping my lips. How many times are you going to do this, David? How many times are Mom and Dad going to have to bail you out? At least they love me, he shouted, his face contorted. They've always loved me more, and you can't stand it. The lobby went dead quiet. Even Chloe lowered her phone slightly, stunned by his outburst. You're right, I said, my voice steady, betraying no emotion. They do love you more. They always have. But love doesn't pay mortgages, David. Love doesn't protect retirement accounts. Love doesn't excuse fraud. I'm calling the lawyers, he threatened, puffing out his chest. They'll prove you tricked them. Go ahead, call them, I challenged. Show them your financial records. Explain how you convinced our parents to mortgage their retirement for your failed ventures. Tell them about the investors you misled. I'm sure they'll be fascinated. Security was moving closer, but I held up a hand to stop them. You're just jealous, he spat, a desperate accusation. Jealous that I have vision, that I take risks while you hide in your safe little corporate job. I laughed then. Actually laughed, a genuine, mirthless sound. My safe little job. I make 7 figures, David. I lead development teams across 3 continents. But you wouldn't know that because none of you ever asked. You were too busy celebrating your latest scheme to notice I'd already succeeded. Liar. But I saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes, the dawning realization. Security, I called out, my voice ringing clear. Please escort my brother out, and if he returns, call the police. This isn't over, he shouted as they led him toward the door. Mom and Dad will never forgive you. They don't have to, I replied, watching his retreating form. They just have to pay rent. As the doors closed behind them, I noticed Michael standing nearby. He'd come down at some point during the confrontation. You okay? He asked, his brow furrowed. Surprisingly, yes. I smoothed my blazer, feeling a strange lightness. Though I suspect that video will go viral by dinner. You know, he said, walking me back to the elevators, I've known you for 3 years. Never knew you had a brother. That's because I never talked about him, I replied. Just like they never talked about me. The elevator doors opened. Funny how family works sometimes. Back at my desk, I had 17 missed calls from Mom and a text from Dad. Please, let's talk about this. We can work something out as a family. I opened my email instead and began drafting a formal lease agreement. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, market rate rent for the area. Professional. Clean. Businesslike. No family discount. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Isabella. Your brother's girlfriend just posted the lobby video. She said it's trending. Of course it is. I kept typing. Let me guess. I'm the villain. Actually, she said, a hint of surprise in her voice, the comments are turning. People are starting to ask questions about your brother's businesses. About your parents' choices. The truth has a way of coming out. I finished the lease agreement and hit send. They thought I was their fallback plan, I said, a quiet triumph in my voice. They never saw I became their endgame. The video went viral, but not in the way Chloe planned. Someone dug up David's business history. All the failed startups, the angry investors, the pattern of family bailouts. Soon the comments shifted from toxic sister, to entitled brother and enabling parents. Mom tried damage control at church that Sunday. I heard about it from Aunt Carol, who'd switched sides after seeing the full story. She told everyone you manipulated them, Aunt Carol reported over coffee. But then Mrs. Jenkins, you remember her, the accountant, asked about David's businesses. It got very quiet very fast. I stirred my latte. Let me guess. Mom left early. Practically ran out, Aunt Carol confirmed. But not before people started asking about all those loans they've taken out over the years. The truth has a way of snowballing once it starts rolling. By Monday, Chloe's followers were digging up promotional posts for David's previous ventures. Tuesday brought screenshots from angry investors. By Wednesday, his LinkedIn profile had mysteriously vanished. I was reviewing quarterly reports when Michael stopped by my desk. There's someone here to see you, he said. Says she's from the Chamber of Commerce. In the conference room, I found Rebecca Stone, the Chamber's director, waiting with a folder. Miss Eleanor, she smiled, extending a hand. I've been following your situation with interest. The viral video, you mean? Actually, your career, she corrected, her eyes twinkling. You've built quite a reputation in tech, but somehow stayed under the radar until now. She opened the folder. We're launching an initiative for young women in STEM. Mentorship, scholarships, business incubation. We need someone to lead it. Someone who understands both success and adversity. I raised an eyebrow. My family drama made you think of me? Your handling of it did, she affirmed. You turned a personal crisis into a masterclass in consequences and accountability. That's exactly what we need. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from Dad. Your brother's in trouble. Real trouble. Some investors are threatening legal action. Please, we need your help. I muted the notification and turned back to Rebecca. Tell me more about this initiative. We spent an hour discussing plans, possibilities, and funding. By the end, I was more than just intrigued. There's just one thing, Rebecca said, gathering her papers. We need a physical location. Somewhere accessible with enough space for workshops and meetings. I thought about my house. My parents' house. With its large basement and convenient suburban location. I might have something in mind. I said, a new vision forming. Later that evening, I was working late when Michael brought me coffee. You missed quite a show in the parking lot, he said, shaking his head. Your brother tried to ambush you again. Security caught him trying to let the air out of your tires. I sighed. Did they call the police this time? Didn't have to, he chuckled. Turns out some of his angry investors were following him. They were very interested in having a chat. My phone lit up with a call from Mom. I let it go to voicemail. You know, Michael said, sitting on the edge of my desk, I grew up with a golden child sister. Nothing I did was ever good enough compared to her dance recital. How did you handle it? I moved across the country and built my own life, I replied. But you, he smiled. You stayed and built something stronger than their favoritism. My email pinged. The Chamber's official proposal. As I read through it, another text from Mom arrived. People at church are asking questions. How could you do this to our family's reputation? I closed the message and opened my calendar instead, scheduling a meeting with a contractor to discuss renovating the basement. They're not going to stop, Michael warned. Family rarely does. No, I agreed. But they'll have to learn new rules, starting with paying rent on time. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Chloe of all people. David's investors are like super mad. Can you maybe help for family? I showed Michael the message and we both laughed. You know what the funny part is? I said, turning back to my work, a sense of profound peace settling in. If they just treated me like family to begin with, none of this would have happened. Their loss, he said, standing to leave. But the tech community's gain. Those girls in the STEM program are going to learn from the best. After he left, I finally listened to Mom's voicemail. She was crying, talking about family loyalty and forgiveness, and how they'd always supported my little computer jobs. I deleted it and opened the contractor's website. The basement would need new wiring, better lighting, maybe some built-in workstations. A place where young women could build their futures without anyone telling them to dream smaller. My phone lit up one last time. Isabella, sending a link to a local news article. Tech executives' viral family drama sparks discussion about financial abuse and accountability. I smiled and clicked share. The contractor's estimate arrived the same day my parents finally agreed to meet. They chose a coffee shop, neutral ground. Mom looked like she hadn't slept in days, and Dad's hands shook as he stirred his untouched coffee. "We've been thinking," Mom started, her voice carefully measured, "about what you said about enabling David." I waited, sipping my Americano. "Some of his investors came to the house," Dad continued, his voice barely a whisper. "They were angry, very angry. Showed us things we didn't know about. Promises he'd made." I set down my cup. And we realize now that maybe. Mom's composure cracked slightly. "Maybe we made some mistakes." Mistakes. I pulled out my tablet, opening the contractor's plans. "Let's talk about mistakes. You mortgaged your retirement 6 times for David's schemes. You missed my graduation for his football game. You told me MIT was too expensive while buying him a car for networking purposes." "We know," Dad said quietly, his gaze fixed on the table. "We know now. But we can fix this. Just give us back the house before it ruins your soul." I turned my tablet around, showing them the renovation plans. "See this? I'm converting the basement into a tech education center for young women. The Chamber of Commerce is partnering with us. We'll offer mentorship, scholarships, internships." Mom barely glanced at it. "But what about family? What about David? What about him?" I countered. "His investors are threatening legal action. His girlfriend's influencer career is tanking because she helped him promote fraudulent businesses. He made his choices. We were just trying to do what was best for both of you." Mom insisted, her voice rising. "You were always so capable, so independent." I had to be. The words came out sharper than intended, laced with years of suppressed pain. "You left me no choice. Every time I needed support, you were too busy supporting him. Every achievement, every milestone, it all took second place to David's latest scheme." "That's not fair," Dad protested weakly. "No, it wasn't fair." I agreed, a cold, hard truth. None of it was fair. But here's what's going to happen now. I pulled out a folder. "I'm creating a living trust for the house. It will fund the education center and provide housing assistance for program participants." Mom's face went pale. "But what about inheritance? What about David's future?" "David's future is whatever he makes of it," I stated plainly. "Without your money, without my house, without any more safety nets." "You can't do this," Mom whispered, her voice barely audible. "We're your parents. We always tried to do what was best for David." I finished for her, the old wound aching but not bleeding anymore. Always best for David. Well, now I'm doing what's best for dozens of young women who deserve a chance, who deserve better than being told they're too capable to need support. Dad reached for the folder, but I pulled it back. "It's already done. The trust is established. The contractors start next week. You can stay as tenants if you want. Market rate rent, no family discount, but the house will never be yours again. And it will never be David's." "We could fight this," Mom said, but her voice lacked all conviction. "We could," I confirmed. "Like the lawyers currently looking into David's business practices. Go ahead. I'm sure they'd love to add parental enablement to their investigation." A notification popped up on my tablet. "Isabella, confirming the trust paperwork was filed." I stood up, gathering my things. "You said you were trying to do what was best for us," I said, a finality in my tone. "Now I'm doing what's best for me. And for every other daughter who's been told she's too capable to need help." "Please," Mom tried one last time. "We're still family." "Yes, we are," I replied, looking at them, truly seeing them for perhaps the first time. "And families have rules, boundaries, consequences. You taught David none of those things, so I'm teaching them to you instead." I left them there, Mom crying silently into her cold coffee, Dad staring at nothing. Outside, I called Michael. "How'd it go?" he asked. "About as expected." I said, getting into my car. They're still more worried about David than anything else, even with the investors breathing down his neck. Even then. But it doesn't matter anymore. The trust is filed. The contractors are scheduled. It's done. You know what you said about teaching them consequences? Michael paused. You're going to teach those girls something even more valuable. How to stand up for themselves. I started the engine, watching through the coffee shop window as my parents huddled together, probably already planning how to help David out of his latest mess. You said I owed you this family, I muttered, echoing words I'd been holding back for years. Now you owe me everything with interest. The renovation plan sat on my passenger seat. A blueprint for something better than family obligation. Something built on merit, not manipulation. On earned success, not endless enablement. It was time to build something new. The construction noise from the basement filled the house, a symphony of progress, as I reviewed applications for our first cohort of STEM scholars. 20 bright young women, all brilliant, all overlooked, all reminding me of myself at their age. My phone buzzed. A text from Michael. News about your brother just dropped. Check your email. The headline was exactly what I'd expected. Local tech entrepreneur faces federal investigation for investment fraud. Below it, David's familiar face smiled from his LinkedIn profile photo, still believing he was untouchable. The doorbell rang. Mom stood there, looking smaller than I remembered. The moving truck comes tomorrow, she said, without preamble. We found an apartment across town. I know, I replied. I approved your rental reference. I let her in, watching her take in the changes. The living room was now a reception area with inspirational posters and a sleek sign reading, Newton's STEM Initiative. Your father, she hesitated, her voice brittle. He's not doing well. The stress of everything. You mean the stress of finally facing consequences? I countered gently. She flinched. David might go to jail. Yes, I agreed. He might. A young woman in a hard hat appeared from the basement. Miss Eleanor, we need your input on the workstation layout. I'll be right there. I called back, then turned to Mom. Was there something specific you needed? She pulled out an old photo album. I found this while packing. Thought you might want it. I opened it to find my academic awards, newspaper clippings about my achievements, college acceptance letters. All carefully preserved. You kept these? My voice was barely a whisper. Of course I did. Her voice cracked. You were my brilliant girl. I thought you didn't need me to say it. You were so capable, so strong. I needed you to show up, I said, closing the album. The words a gentle ache. Not just keep a scrapbook. The construction manager called up again. Miss Eleanor. Keep it, Mom said, pushing the album toward me. Maybe show it to your students. Show them what's possible. As she turned to leave, she paused. That article about David, will he really go to prison? The evidence is pretty clear, I said. His investors are cooperating with the investigation, and Chloe turned state's witness. Apparently, she recorded everything. Mom nodded slowly, a profound weariness on her face. You know what the worst part is? I can't even blame you anymore. We did this. All of it. The front door opened, and Rebecca from the Chamber of Commerce walked in with a group of potential donors. Eleanor, perfect timing. These gentlemen want to see the facility. Mom slipped out as I led the tour, showing them the emerging computer lab, the presentation space, the mentorship offices. Their questions were thoughtful, their checkbooks ready. This is exactly what the community needs, one donor said. A place where talent isn't overlooked. After they left, Isabella arrived with a stack of papers. Final paperwork on the trust, she said. Once you sign, it's irrevocable. The house will permanently serve its new purpose. I signed without hesitation. Your parents' apartment? She asked. Signed their lease yesterday. I confirmed. Market rate, no special terms. And David? Isabella smirked. His lawyer called, wanted to know if I'd testify about family dynamics, paint him as a victim of enabling parents. I smiled. I declined. Michael appeared in the doorway. Contractors need you again. Something about the wiring specs. Before heading downstairs, I stopped at the new bulletin board. It was empty now, waiting for our first student's achievements to fill it. Next to it hung a single frame, my MIT acceptance letter, finally displayed after all these years. You know, Michael said, following my gaze. You could have just sold the house. Walked away clean. This isn't about walking away. I touched the frame, a deep satisfaction settling in my chest. It's about building something better. Something that matters. My phone lit up with a final text from Mom. Moving trucks booked. Your father wants to know if you'll have dinner with us sometime. Just dinner. No asking for anything. I showed Michael the message. Will you go? He asked. Maybe, I said, a faint smile playing on my lips. On my terms this time. The construction manager called up again about the wiring, and I headed down to the basement. The space was transforming. Bright. Open. Full of possibility. Everything I'd wished for at their age. I didn't burn bridges. I realized. I invested in better roads. They just chose not to travel them. But these girls would. These brilliant, overlooked, capable girls would build their own paths, their own success stories. And this time, someone would be there to support them. The house wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every young woman who needed what I never had. A chance to shine without being told she was too bright. That was worth more than any inheritance. And so, the work began. The construction noise from the basement, far from being an irritant, became a symphony of progress. It filled the house, my house, with the promise of transformation. I spent my evenings after long days at my cubicle job, a term I now wore with defiant pride, poring over applications for our first cohort of STEM scholars. 20 bright young women, all brilliant, all overlooked, all reminding me so much of myself at their age. Their essays spoke of dreams stifled by circumstances, of raw talent yearning for opportunity. I felt a fierce, protective joy reading each one. This wasn't just about proving a point. It was about building a legacy, a lifeline for others who, like me, were deemed too capable to need a helping hand. My phone buzzed. A text from Michael. News about your brother just dropped. Check your email. My heart didn't clench, didn't race. Just a calm certainty. I forwarded the message to Isabella with a simple "your thoughts" before opening the link Michael sent. The headline was exactly what I'd expected, almost a relief to see it in print. Local tech entrepreneur faces federal investigation for investment fraud. Below it, a familiar face smiled from his LinkedIn profile photo, David. Still believing he was untouchable. Still that same infuriating, unearned confidence. The comment section, of course, was a battleground, but this time, the narrative had flipped. The tide had turned, and the undercurrent of public sentiment now carried a sharp sting of accountability for David. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, Mom stood there, looking smaller than I remembered, almost frail. Her eyes were shadowed, her shoulders slumped. The new dress she'd worn on her birthday, probably bought with money David had talked her into lending him, was nowhere in sight. She was dressed in something nondescript, worn. The moving truck comes tomorrow, she said, without preamble, her voice hollow. We found an apartment across town. I know, I replied, my voice softer than I intended, but firm. I approved your rental reference. It had been a professional transaction, facilitated through Isabella, ensuring they had a place, but also setting clear boundaries. I let her in, watching her take in the changes. The living room, once a space filled with forced family cheer and David's dramatic pronouncements, was now transforming. Half finished, but the bones of its new purpose were already visible. It was becoming a reception area, a welcoming space. Inspirational posters, temporary but vibrant, adorned the walls, and a sleek, modern sign lay on a table, waiting to be mounted. Newton's STEM Initiative. Your father, she hesitated, her eyes scanning the stripped walls, the covered furniture. He's not doing well. The stress of everything. You mean the stress of finally facing consequences? I finished for her, not unkindly, but with an unwavering honesty that had become my new default. She flinched. David might go to jail. Yes, I agreed, meeting her gaze. He might. There was no satisfaction in the words, only a stark truth. Just then, a young woman in a hard hat, one of the student volunteers helping with the lighter construction tasks, appeared from the basement stairwell, dust smudged on her cheek, a blueprint clutched in her hand. Miss Eleanor, we need your input on the workstation layout. The contractors want to confirm the power outlets before they drywall. I'll be right there, I called back, a surge of pride swelling in my chest. I turned back to Mom. Was there something specific you needed? She looked at me, then at the young woman descending back into the vibrant chaos of the basement. A flicker of something, perhaps understanding, perhaps regret, crossed her face. She reached into her worn purse and pulled out an old photo album, its cover faded with time. I found this while packing. Thought you might want it. I took it, my fingers tracing the familiar texture. I opened it to find a meticulously preserved collection, my academic awards, newspaper clippings about my achievements, college acceptance letters, a certificate from a local science fair-eyed one in middle school. All carefully preserved. You kept these? My voice was barely a whisper, a strange mix of disbelief and a raw ache I hadn't realized was still there. Of course I did, her voice cracked, the carefully constructed composure finally shattering. You were my brilliant girl. I thought you didn't need me to say it. You were so capable, so strong. I needed you to show up, I said, closing the album, the words a gentle ache, a truth that had taken decades to articulate. Not just keep a scrapbook. The construction manager called up again, his voice booming playfully. Miss Eleanor, we're losing daylight down here. Keep it, Mom said, pushing the album back towards me, her eyes glistening. Maybe show it to your students. Show them what's possible. As she turned to leave, she paused at the door, her hand on the knob. That article about David, will he really go to prison? The evidence is pretty clear, I said. His investors are cooperating with the investigation, and Chloe turned state's witness. Apparently, she recorded everything. Mom nodded slowly, a profound weariness settling on her face. You know what the worst part is? I can't even blame you anymore. We did this. All of it. The front door opened, and Rebecca from the Chamber of Commerce walked in with a group of potential donors, their suits crisp, their expressions curious. Eleanor, perfect timing. These gentlemen want to see the facility. Mom slipped out, a ghost leaving a house reborn, as I led the tour, my voice filled with a passion I hadn't realized I possessed. I showed them the emerging computer lab, the presentation space, the mentorship offices. Their questions were thoughtful, their checkbooks ready. This is exactly what the community needs, one donor said, his eyes scanning the blueprints for future expansion. A place where talent isn't overlooked. After they left, Isabella arrived with a stack of papers, her usual composed demeanor barely hiding a triumphant glint in her eye. Final paperwork on the trust, she said. Once you sign, it's irrevocable. The house will permanently serve its new purpose. I signed without hesitation, the pen flowing smoothly, definitively. There was no turning back, and I felt nothing but peace. Your parents' apartment? She asked, gathering her things. Signed their lease yesterday. I confirmed. Market rate, no special terms. And David? Isabella smirked, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. His lawyer called, wanted to know if I'd testify about family dynamics, paint him as a victim of enabling parents. I smiled. I declined. The thought of giving him any more airtime, any more stage, was repellent. He had made his bed. Michael appeared in the doorway, his own smile wide. Contractors need you again. Something about the wiring specs. Before heading downstairs, I stopped at the new bulletin board. It was empty now, waiting for our first student's achievements to fill it. Next to it hung a single frame, my MIT acceptance letter, finally displayed after all these years. It wasn't a boast. It was a testament. A silent, powerful declaration of what I could have been, what I chose to be, even without their support. You know, Michael said, following my gaze, a thoughtful expression on his face. You could have just sold the house, walked away clean, made a massive profit. This isn't about walking away. I touched the frame, a deep satisfaction settling in my chest. It's about building something better, something that matters. My phone lit up with a final text from Mom. Moving trucks booked. Your father wants to know if you'll have dinner with us sometime. Just dinner. No asking for anything. I showed Michael the message. Will you go? He asked, his tone carefully neutral. Maybe, I said, a faint smile playing on my lips. On my terms this time. The construction manager called up again about the wiring, and I headed down to the basement. The space was transforming. Bright. Open. Full of possibility. Everything I'd wished for at their age. I didn't burn bridges. I realized I invested in better roads. They just chose not to travel them. But these girls would. These brilliant, overlooked, capable girls would build their own paths, their own success stories. And this time, someone would be there to support them. The house wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every young woman who needed what I never had. A chance to shine without being told she was too bright. That was worth more than any inheritance. The Newton STEM initiative launched with a small, heartfelt ceremony just 3 months later. The basement, once a dusty storage space, was now a vibrant hub of learning, gleaming workstations, whiteboards filled with complex equations, and the excited chatter of our first cohort. Rebecca from the chamber spoke glowingly, Michael clapped the loudest, and Isabella, ever the stoic, gave me a rare, proud nod. My parents weren't there, of course. They'd sent a potted plant. A small gesture, a fragile bridge I wasn't ready to cross. Our first cohort was nothing short of incredible. Girls like Maya, whose family lived in a shelter, but whose code was already turning heads. Or Sophia, who'd been told by her high school counselor to think more practically than engineering, but who now designed intricate circuits with breathtaking precision. They were hungry, resilient, and utterly fearless. Being a mentor, seeing their sparks ignite, felt more rewarding than any promotion or million-dollar project. I found a purpose beyond my own ambition, a way to channel the fire that had once burned as resentment into a beacon for others. David's legal troubles, meanwhile, became a cautionary tale that played out publicly. The federal investigation moved swiftly. Chloe's recordings, detailed and damning, painted a clear picture of fraudulent promises and reckless disregard. He was indicted, and after a protracted legal battle that drained my parents' remaining savings, money they had, ironically, been trying to save for his bail, David was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison. It was less than I might have expected, but it was a sentence nonetheless. A consequence he couldn't charm or manipulate his way out of. My parents moved into their rented apartment. It was modest, certainly a downgrade from the home they'd lived in for decades. The dinner invitation became a recurring theme in Mom's texts, laced with an increasing desperation. I avoided it for months, not out of cruelty, but because I needed to solidify my new boundaries, to protect the peace I had painstakingly built. Then one quiet Sunday evening, I agreed. Not at their apartment and not at a restaurant. I suggested a park, a neutral territory, open to the elements. They arrived looking older, their faces etched with lines I hadn't fully noticed before. There was no David, no Chloe, no grand pronouncements. Just the 3 of us, sitting on a park bench, the city humming around us. "We miss you, Eleanor," Mom said, her voice thin. "And we're sorry," Dad added, his gaze fixed on the distant skyline. "For everything. For not seeing you. For not supporting you the way we should have." It wasn't a perfect apology, not a full reckoning of years of neglect and favoritism. But it was a start. It was an acknowledgement. "I heard David got sentenced," I said, changing the subject. It wasn't an easy conversation. We talked about the weather, about their new apartment, about my work. They asked about the initiative, cautiously, hesitantly. I spoke about the girls, about Maya and Sophia, about the joy of building something real. I could see a flicker of pride in their eyes, a genuine one this time. unburdened by comparison to David. There was no grand reconciliation, no tearful embrace that night. That wasn't our family's way. But something shifted. A tiny crack appeared in the wall between us, not wide enough for them to walk back into my life the way they had before, but perhaps enough for a tentative connection. The terms for dinner, it turned out, were simply honesty and respect. Nothing more, nothing less. Over the next year, my parents slowly adapted to their new reality. They even started attending some of the initiative's open house events, sitting quietly at the back, observing the thriving energy, the young women who now filled their former home with purpose. Once, I saw Dad chatting with Maya's mother, both of them beaming as they watched Maya confidently present her latest robotics project. It was a strange, heartwarming sight. Mom, still prone to the occasional dramatic sigh, seemed to find a quiet pride in my work, in my success, that had always been conspicuously absent before. She stopped asking about David every phone call, instead asking about the students. David, meanwhile, served his time. I never visited him. Isabella kept me vaguely updated. He tried to launch a prison entrepreneurship podcast from his cell, but it fizzled out quickly. Upon release, he found the world far less forgiving than his parents had been. His name was tarnished, his reputation shattered. The last I heard, through a mutual acquaintance, he was working a mundane job, living in a small apartment, still trying to network his way into something, anything. The golden child had finally, definitively, lost his shine. And this time, there was no one left to bail him out. The Newton STEM initiative thrived. Within 2 years, we outgrew the house basement. With a major grant from the Chamber of Commerce and several tech giants, we expanded into a dedicated facility, offering even more programs and reaching more young women. The house, however, remained a symbol, our original hub, a quiet testament to how one woman's breaking point could become a community's beacon. I kept the MIT acceptance letter framed, but now it hung in my office at the new facility, not as a reminder of what was lost, but of what was gained. Looking back, the emotional scars hadn't vanished entirely. There were still moments sometimes when a casual comment or a forgotten memory would sting. But the profound sense of anger and betrayal had been replaced by something stronger, a deep sense of self-worth and an unwavering purpose. I had confronted my past, set my boundaries, and built a future not just for myself, but for countless others. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. It was about breaking a cycle. It was about finally, definitively choosing myself. And in doing so, I had inadvertently chosen to empower an entire generation of bright, capable girls who deserved to be seen, to be heard, and to shine as brightly as they were always meant to. This journey taught me that while family ties can be complex and sometimes deeply painful, true strength lies in defining your own worth, setting your own rules, and building your own legacy. It showed me that even the most painful betrayals can forge an unshakable foundation for something truly extraordinary. And that, my friends, was worth every single penny. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to draw a hard line with family to protect your own well-being or pursue your dreams? How did you navigate those difficult conversations? Share your experiences in the comments below. I'm reading every one.